Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
International Clown Week was passed into U.S. law by President Richard Nixon on August 2nd, 1971. Welcome to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. This week we are doing clown facts because our top 10 is going to be about Kim Jung Un, so I thought it would only be fitting. But we are first going to go into my weird news animal stories first, which includes a war that is being started between Spain and orca whales, as well as a few others, of course. Then we will go ahead and move on to my second segment, where I will give you stories themed around regression, evidence that mankind is just getting ready to de-evolve, because frankly, there's a lot of stories this week about that, including a Taco Bell branded wine, holy lord, and a mountain community that celebrates Bigfoot as a social distancing champion. We have truly lost our minds. And in the third segment, we will jump right into the obvious weird news story of the week. The clouds of Venus, which scientists are now saying have signs of extraterrestrial life. Big news story, so we're going to try to dedicate the entire third segment to that one. And then, of course, in the fourth segment, I will give you my top 10 Kim Jung Un rumors and conspiracy theories. Who knows, maybe it'll be fun. Tensions escalate between orcas and Spain as illegal whaling operations increase, and the orcas respond by ramming sailboats. Is this a sign of war to come? Scientists think so. According to this here article, scientists have been left baffled by incidents of orcas ramming sailboats along the Spanish and Portuguese coasts. In the past 2 months, from southern to northern Spain, sailors have actually sent distress calls after worrying encounters with said violent orca whales. 2 boats lost part of their rudders, at least 1 crew member suffered bruising from the impact of the ramming, and several boats sustained serious damage. This is particularly interesting because it seems to be a retaliatory move from the whales, as illegal whaling efforts have increased this year due to economic disparity. The latest incident occurred on Friday afternoon just off of Corunna, which is the northern coast of Spain. Halcyon Yachts was taking a 36-foot boat to the UK when an orca rammed its stern at least 15 times. According to Peter Green, the company's managing director, the boat lost steering and was towed into port to assess damage. Now, this is particularly disturbing, as it's very easy to draw similarities between these orca whales and the United States military. Right? I mean, pre-World War II, nobody really cared about the United States. Next thing you know, we nudged a few boats, and now we're the greatest military force the world has ever seen. Who's not to say it's the orca's turn? Well, according to these scientists, these attacks are occurring more and more often and becoming more and more dangerous. On the 30th of August, a French-flagged vessel radioed the Coast Guard to say it was, quote, under attack from killer whales. Later that day, a Spanish naval yacht lost part of its rudder after an encounter with orcas under the stern. So they are battling ships to the point that requires the Coast Guard to come and intervene, and then they are attacking the Spanish Navy. One of the reasons scientists are so worried is because orcas are considered to be one of the most intelligent mammals, as well as a social mammal. So much like pop stars, they can influence society. They've always been known to be curious animals as well, so it's not entirely surprising that they've played around with boats in the past, but they have never attacked boats to the point that requires the Coast Guard and the Navy to intervene. And in typical Spanish fashion, they did not de-escalate. In fact, they put out a maritime authority which is now warning all vessels to keep a distance. They themselves have recorded at least one pod of orca whales, which appears to be pursuing boats in a behavior that scientists agree is, quote, highly unusual and concerning. They go on to say, quote, it is too early to understand what is going on, but it might indicate stress in a population that is in danger due to growing occurrences of whaling. So basically Jaws 4, The Revenge. One of the more terrifying incidents occurred in the 29th of July, 2020, in which a young lady was crewing a 46-foot delivery boat that was surrounded by 9 orca whales. The beasts rammed the hull for over an hour, spinning the boat 180 degrees, disabling the engine and breaking the rudder. And it is said that between attacks, they actually communicated with loud whistling sounds. This is it, folks. This is where the revolution starts. This is where humans are dethroned as the top animal. The young lady who experienced the ordeal said that it was, quote, totally orchestrated. I'm not sure if that's a scary saying or a pun, orchestrated. Perhaps they should have left more context in there. But she went on to cite multiple horror stories involving other people and their boats being rammed by orcas and one person even being murdered by one. But unfortunately, there's no official citations on that as of yet. Scientists are still confused, but they expect that if whaling stops, so will the whales' attacks. That's the end of that whale story, but don't worry, we have another one. I know that's why you guys come here, is for whale stories. A humpback whale enters Crocodile River in Australia. Don't worry, this will be a short one. It is said that a group of whales went on their annual sea migration when some of them, quote, took a wrong turn, according to experts. You know, whale experts. Out of the entire group, only one whale remains. This is because they kept getting torn apart by crocodiles. Which is just horrific because it means there will be a lot more crocodiles now. To eat an entire school of whales is really going to cause a surge in population. However, the one whale that has survived is not likely to be disturbed by crocodiles simply due to its size. It is 52 feet long, which is about twice as big as all of the other whales in the pod. And in a beautiful act of generosity, Australia has banned boats along the river so that the whale has a clear path back to the ocean. And if that doesn't work, they will try desperate measures, including pushing the whale with a boat, which, if my last story taught me anything, is not going to be a successful strategy. Hopefully the whale can make it away from the crocodiles. Speaking of crocodiles, a 10-foot alligator ambushed and attacked a woman trimming trees in Florida. My Florida story of the goddamn week. The 27-year-old woman had been working near the water in North Fort Myers when a 10-foot reptile ambushed her. According to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, this is incredibly unorthodox. Typically, you don't see these massive beasts so desperate that they would ever attack a human, much less one that was in the process of trimming trees with a sharp object. The woman was thankfully treated to injuries that took place on both her left and right legs, which is kind of spooky. That means he probably had her in his mouth pretty deep. And Florida has now contracted a nuisance alligator trapper in order to capture the animal and remove it from the area, which is a roundabout way of saying kill it. Many of the experts, that's alligator experts, are worried that this is due to people trying to feed the alligator, that it saw a human and thought, oh, it's time to eat now. So if you see an alligator, don't throw it any Cheetos or anything. Just leave it alone. And that is the end of my animal stories. But we have a little more time left, so let me jump into my regression stories. Stories that prove that mankind is truly regressing instead of evolving. And we're going to start with a 22-year-old Slovenian woman who deliberately sawed off her own hand as part of an insurance scam. She claimed that this happened as she cut branches from her tree in her backyard, and as a result she stand to gain more than 1 million euros or 1.16 million US dollars in payouts. This all began in 2019 when she arrived in a hospital with her hand cut off above the wrist. However, the hospital recognized this was kind of a fishy cut and immediately arrested her as well as many of her relatives. Goodness gracious, that is brutal. The court found that she and her boyfriend had intentionally left the severed hand behind rather than bringing it with them to the hospital in order to ensure that the disability would be permanent and their payment would be insured. However, the authorities recovered it in time to sew it back on. Haha. You know you've put yourself in an odd situation when it's a bad thing when you get your hand sewn back on. Prosecutors said that the woman's boyfriend has also made internet searches about artificial hands in the days before she lost her limb. And therefore, prosecutors are saying that this is proof that the injury was in fact intentional. And when the 22-year-old woman's father owned up to knowing about it, he was also given a 1-year suspended sentence. Nevertheless, throughout the entire trial, the young lady has denied intentionally cutting off her hand. And the courts have since found her guilty. Some of the most damning evidence includes the fact that the family had taken out 5 insurance policies in the past year alone before the injury occurred, and all of them were taken out on her alone. So she had 5 insurance policies on her, and the rest of her family had none. I like how they were willing to go to lengths to cut off their own hands, but not willing to pay the extra $30 a month in order to make it look like everybody in their family got insurance. And thusly, our first case of human regressionism. Alright, next story. An Ottawa tourism councilman launches an innovative way to get Canadian visitors to visit Ottawa. Pay them $100. This is, of course, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has made Canada's tourism pretty bad in the past 6 months. And so, to encourage visitation to Ottawa from nearby cities like Montreal and Toronto, Ottawa is launching an initiative that gives visitors $100 towards one of their hotels. The idea is that it will draw people in and have them spend more money and time in Ottawa in order to make up for the lost months in revenue and to keep local businesses alive. So if you've ever wanted to go to Ottawa but you're always just been $100 short for some reason, you can now go to the Ottawa Tourism webpage and use their promo code in order to sign up and get $100 off your hotel. Isn't that fantastic? But be warned, bookings must be made before September 30th. But I must admit I'm a bit confused because usually taxation is how you get funds for government spending. So if the Ottawa government, or the Canadian government, I guess, is giving out $100, then they have to get that $100 from somewhere. So they're taking $100 from the pockets of people so that they can get $100 back. These circulatory economics don't make a whole bunch of sense to me, especially since they are only encouraging people from Canada to visit the big city. It would make a lot more sense if people with foreign currencies were coming, because if you gave them $100, then they would be forced to spend it because it's Canadian dollars. But in their defense, this isn't the first time they've tried a stunt like this. A few years ago, they tried a similar stunt where they gave away $100 Visa gift cards to visitors under the same conditions. The only problem was that the promotion was so popular that their supply of Visa cards quickly depleted, causing mass riots at their actual distribution center. Goodness gracious. That doesn't sound good at all. Hopefully they've rubbed out a few of the kinks in that whole system, but I don't know, and I don't think they know either. Okay. Alright, we have time for one more short story. Police stopped a car after spotting an iron being held out of the window, only to be told that it was in an effort to cool the iron down. This occurred in the town of Dorset, which is in the United Kingdom, and it's pretty short and sweet as a story. There's just a guy holding an iron outside of his car. The police pulled him over, and they had this to say, quote, "On first view, we thought these were legs hanging out the window. When we stopped to ask why they were hanging an iron out of their window, they were cooling it down," they said. They did not want to put the iron in the actual car because they thought it might start a fire or something. Quote, "We offered words of advice suggesting to keep the iron in the car or wait until it's cooled down before driving." And then the man in the car responded, "There's no reason to get steamed up about this." He had a line ready to go. And then the cop allegedly snapped back, "This is a pressing matter." Goodness gracious, way too many puns in this story. Okay, that is it for this segment. Stay tuned to the next segment where we will continue the de-evolution of humankind with stories such as vinyl outselling CDs, and a monkey who stole somebody's phone and took selfies on it. While we de-evolve, they will take our place. Stay tuned!
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Serial killer John Wayne Gacy spent his free time as a clown named Pogo. Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. We're going to talk about the de-evolution of mankind during this segment. In the next segment, we will be going in depth about the clouds of Venus, which scientists say may have signs of extraterrestrial life. And then, of course, in the final segment, we will wrap up on our clown-themed show by talking about the top 10 Kim Jung Un crazy rumors and conspiracy theories. But for now, sit back and enjoy a drink as we talk about a Malaysian man who found monkey selfies on his phone after he lost and found it. The content included footage of a monkey that appeared to be trying to eat the phone, as well as sexy half-face shots. Goodness gracious. These have been wildly shared on social media. Initially, the student said he thought that his phone had been stolen while he was sleeping, but it remained unclear exactly how the mobile went missing. However, monkey experts, said that it's not uncommon for the curious animals to play around with something they don't quite understand. More confusing than that, though, it is also not possible to verify the circumstances in which the photos and videos ended up on the man's phone. However, according to the 20-year-old, he realized that his smartphone went missing when he woke up around 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. Quote, "There was no sign of robbery. The only thing on my mind was that it was some kind of sorcery." If you couldn't tell, this was a computer science student. Anyway, a few hours later, in a video shared with the BBC, a monkey appeared to be trying to eat his phone. You can go online and watch the video in which the primate can be seen staring down the camera against a backdrop of bright green leaves and crowning birds. And there were also a series of photos of the monkey, trees, and other foliage on the phone. The 20-year-old said that he failed to find any trace of his cell device until Sunday afternoon when his father noticed a monkey outside of the house. On calling his phone again, he heard ringing from the jungle a few steps beyond the back garden. It was then that he discovered the muddied phone on some leaves beneath a palm tree. His uncle then joked that maybe there was a photo of the phone thief on the phone. So after cleaning it, he opened the picture gallery and, quote, "Boom, it's full of monkey photos." Now, in most areas where monkeys live near urban areas, there is no history of monkeys stealing things from houses in the local neighborhoods. However, in more remote areas, it is well known to keep your stuff well locked up so that the primates cannot have access to anything that looks unordinary. Quote, "Something that you might see once in a century in urban areas." But of course, this isn't the first time that a monkey selfie has made headlines. In 2017, a British photographer settled a 2-year legal fight against an animal rights group over an image taken by a macaque, which is a type of monkey. According to the animal rights group, since the monkey was the one who took the photo, he owned the rights to it, and therefore the photographer couldn't use it, even though it was his camera, and the monkey had stolen it. Thankfully, a U.S. court ruled that copyright protection cannot be applied to the monkey and dismissed PETA's case. Despite all this, the man in question agreed to donate 25% of any future revenue from the image to charities protecting animal rights, specifically those of primates in Indonesia. Fantastic. Next story. A mountain community celebrates Bigfoot as a, quote, social distancing champ. What did I tell you guys? Regression after regression. September is traditionally when visitors and locals alike celebrate a certain mythical creature in McDowell County. And this year, due to the pandemic, the county is hosting a, quote, Bigfoot scavenger hunt instead of the usual celebration, which was called off in July due to the pandemic. How does it work, you ask? What a stupid question. Locals and visitors will hunt for Bigfoot emblems, which are scattered throughout the county. The list of emblems is available online at McDowell County Visitor Center, but then, this is the fun part, they will actually go hunting for the famous beast. County tourism officials say it will take you all throughout the area of McDowell County. Quote, Bigfoot is the social distancing champion of the world. There are a lot of traditional businesses that have been in the community for a while that are part of the hunt, and some new ones further out that are going to test people's knowledge. After finding the emblems, participants take a picture of it. When they've collected enough, they can be emailed in for a prize. Once the fictitious hunting is done, we can partake in an actual Bigfoot hunt, so long as we manage to keep 6 feet of distance as the great beast would want us to. People have lost their minds. But hey, if you want to go and support McDowell County, you can go ahead and email them at bigfoothuntmarathon@gmail.com by September 30th, 2020. Fantastic. Isn't that fantastic? Vinyl record sales surpass CDs for the first time since the 1980s. This is our 5th regression story. According to a sales analyst, quote, the days of vinyl records being a nostalgic relic of the past are long gone. This year, vinyl sales have outpaced CD sales in the United States for the first time since the 1980s. Vinyl records accounted for $232 million of music sales in the first half of the year alone, compared to CDs, which brought in a measly $129 million, according to a report from the Recording Industry Association of America. Now, of course, vinyl was commonplace long before CDs ever came out, but they have since become the preferred mode of listening to music. Since 2005 alone, sales for vinyl have grown consecutively. In the first half of 2020, vinyl revenue was up 4%, while CD revenue was down 48%. Now, this is all in comparison to digital music, which is streaming, which grew 12% over the past 6 months and brought in $4.8 billion, which means that streaming is dominating music format, clearly accounting for more than 85% of the music industry revenue. Many people say that the reason that CD revenue is going down and vinyl is going up is because vinyl sounds better and it's more hip and cool to be part of the vinyl collector scene rather than the CD collector scene, especially since you can basically just burn your own CD, create your own CD with a blank one, whereas it's nearly impossible to do that with a vinyl record. A lot of goofs say that vinyl sounds better compared to CD, and as somebody who owns 1,000 vinyl records and over 1,000 CDs, I must say that I don't find a huge quality difference between the two. I guess you could say vinyl sounds a bit more lively. But of course, digital is always going to give you more detail. But who cares about that? What we care about is the feds, who proudly announced the seizure of counterfeit Apple AirPods, which are actually OnePlus buds. Oh, this is such a dumb story, but I find it funny. So basically what happened is that officers at JFK Airport broke into some guy's suitcase and found 2,000 counterfeit Apple AirPods, which were coming from Hong Kong, which would have been valued at about $400,000 had they been sold on the market, but thankfully they were stopped. The funny thing is that they weren't just counterfeit AirPods, they were actually from another brand. They were OnePlus buds, simply rebranded to look like they were Apples. The officers boast that they, quote, are protecting the American public from various dangers on a daily basis. The interception of these counterfeit earbuds is a direct reflection of the vigilance and commitment to mission success by our CBP officials daily. Now, here's the part of the story that makes me laugh hysterically. These were never attempted to be counterfeit AirPods. These were always intended to be sold as OnePlus earbuds. They were, in fact, lawfully produced in Hong Kong and were said to be lawfully sold in America, but when one of the officers broke into the packages, he noticed that they did not look like his own AirPods, and therefore he seized all 2,000 packs of the buds, saying that they were all counterfeits. So they just botched about $400,000 worth of fairly sold product from Hong Kong. When they were informed about this, they proudly tweeted, quote, "That's not an apple." Oh my gosh, they clearly don't know what they're doing. So obviously the officers quickly got a lot of flack for just not knowing their technology, which is kind of a vital part of their job, because this ruined about $400,000 worth of legitimate sales. And therefore, OnePlus, the company who made the headphones, responded to them on Twitter and just mocked them ruthlessly. One of them was quite comical. It said, "Hey, give those back," with an upside-down smiley face. And then later that day, they came out with an advertisement based on the seizure of their AirPods, which said, "Seize the day, seize the music." It wasn't until last Monday that the CBP officers came out with more details on why they seized the OnePlus buds, claiming that they violated Apple's configuration trademark for AirPods, even though basically every technology company has the same configuration. And of course, it is not the CBP officer's job to determine whether or not they get to sue for trademark infringement. Thankfully, due to all the flack that the officers are getting, they have returned the 2,000 OnePlus buds to the OnePlus company for distribution. Clearly, these officers have a regressive tendency when it comes to trade. Taco Bell is now selling its own custom wine, though. Isn't that fun? So they debuted their own custom wine, which is called the Jalapeno Noir, in case you were wondering how disgusting the name alone was going to be. But in their own defense, they said that it pairs greatly with their toasted cheesy chalupa. But if you want it, you better act quick, as the wine is only available for a limited time in Canada in order to celebrate the launch of the menu item. Taco Bell Canada said that the release of the duo is, quote, "irresistible. The rich taste and crunchy texture of the beloved toasty cheesy chalupa complements the notes of the wild strawberry cherry and beer root in this silky limited edition red wine." That actually sounded really good when I read it aloud. The wine is said to cost $25 Canadian dollars or $19 US, and it can even be purchased on Canada's website. It is quickly being considered a collector's item. Sadly, the wine will not be sold in the United States once the same chalupa rolls out next November, which is unfortunately part of a border menu shakeup, which is said to have some fan favorites be removed to make place for new items. However, some Taco Bell restaurants in the U.S. sell both food and assorted boozy drinks, such as its Katina locations, which is basically just locations that are on the beaches. If you ever go to like San Francisco and you go to Daly Beach, you will notice that it's a nice, beautiful beach, and then smack dab in the middle there's just a Taco Bell with no stores around it, which is of course quite odd. Speaking of odd, regressive odd, the Japanese military is announcing that it will track UFOs. Now, of course, it makes sense to track unidentified flying objects as they occur, but Japan has specifically said that it is alien UFOs that they are now interested in. This came out last Monday by the Japanese defense minister, who instructed Japanese military personnel on what to do if they spot unidentified aerial objects that could potentially pose a threat to humans all alike. His goal is to assess and gather data collected in order to investigate credible sightings of alien UFOs. This came as a result of the sighting of United States videos which were released last year, which we have covered. These videos occur in naval aviators, which show objects in 2004 and 2015 which have still been unidentified, which many believe to be alien UFOs. And he says that he looks forward to working with the United States in future discoveries. You can hear the boredom in my voice. I really don't like UFO stories, because I find most of the studying that goes on in this UFO industry usually just involves people staring at a blurry square or a circle, and therefore trying to prove that aliens exist, which I think is downright goofy. And more on that, the Japanese Military of Defense has actually had 0 cases of UFO sightings or encounterings, so they really have nothing much to go on. But you know who does? Scientists who say they have found signs of extraterrestrial life on Venus. A big story which we will get to next. So stay tuned for after the break, and after that we will go into my top 10 Kim Jung Un crazy rumors and conspiracy theories. Stay tuned.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Clown laws or clown commandments are a list of rules which specify how clowns should act in society, including not being intoxicated, drinking, smoking, anything that might reflect badly on clowns. I think they should add not being a serial killer to their clown commandments. It might help with some of their negative stigma. Speaking of murderous clowns, in the next segment I will be going over my top 10 Kim Jung Un crazy rumors and conspiracy theories. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get to the biggest story undoubtedly of the week and possibly of the month when it comes to weird news. In the clouds of Venus, scientists may have found signs of extraterrestrial life. Of course, the idea of life beyond Earth has been one much studied by scientists, and it has even led humans to send robots to both the rocky surface of Mars and the classically poisonous Venus. Obviously, nothing has been found yet, but we have also deployed spacecraft to investigate the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, using our most powerful telescopes, which can even check planets on distant solar systems. But now, in an unexpected twist, a group of scientists say that they have found possible signs of extraterrestrial life in a place where few had thought to look. The thick, toxic clouds of Venus, our closest planetary neighbor. Now, of course, this is slightly paradoxical because the reason we thought there shouldn't be life on Venus is because of the atmosphere, which is so inhabitable that when we sent a rover there, I think it lasted about 90 seconds, but I'm sure we'll get to that. But anyway, it's odd that they are now saying that it's the atmosphere itself that may hold life beyond Earth, as in that noxious environment, they have discovered a gas called phosphine that is associated with life on Earth. The notion that Venusian phosphine could have been produced by living organisms may seem absurd at first, but the team members acknowledged that it is one of the most plausible theories that they have. Quote, "There are 2 possibilities for how it got there, and they are both equally crazy." I like how these guys think. They come from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and they went on to say in their Journal of Nature Astronomy, quote, "One scenario is that it is some planetary process that we don't know about. The other is that there is some form of living being in the atmosphere of Venus." One member of the team emphasized that she and her colleagues are not claiming to have found evidence of life on Venus. Instead, they are actually saying that they have found a robust signal of gas that doesn't belong on the planet's atmosphere, and that it will take a lot more work to understand how exactly it got there. And she went on to say, quote, "What we need now is for the scientific community to come and tear this work to shreds." There she is asking for people to study her paper and tell her where she went wrong. Quote, "As a scientist, I want to know where I went wrong." That is how we learn things. Alright, so let's go into phosphine. Phosphine is a pyramid-shaped molecule, which is obviously centered around a phosphorus atom on top and 3 hydrogen atoms at the base. It's difficult to make a rocky planet like Earth and Venus because it takes tremendous pressure and temperatures to get the atoms to bond. This is important because although the conditions exist deep within the interior of gas giants such as Jupiter and Saturn for the building of phosphine, such rocky planets like Earth and Venus simply do not have the thermal environments that would allow phosphine to form spontaneously. So the reason we find phosphine on Earth is the production is associated with anaerobic life, which does not need oxygen to survive, which is incredibly interesting because on Venus it was previously assumed that the lack of oxygen would make it very difficult for life to be there. Moreover, these phosphine-producing animals on Earth can be detected in marshlands, rice fields, sewage plants, animal feces, and the intestinal tracts of fish and human babies, which is a sign that they can inhabit very, very tough terrain. But the scientific team member goes on to say that this is not always a sign of life. Sometimes it is a byproduct of shoddy work in meth labs, and it has even been used as a pesticide and an agent of war. My guess is it's not being used as either of those things on Venus, although it would be very interesting if Venus was just one large meth lab. Quote, "I love phosphine, but I would never want to be in the room with it. It is extremely toxic. Very few people have smelled it and lived." Despite this, it is known that phosphine is associated with life on Earth. In fact, there is nothing else on Earth that produces phosphine. And it has actually been used in the past for the search for life throughout the galaxy. The funny thing is nobody thought to look right next door. Quote, "I considered a huge array of places we might look for phosphine, but I never considered looking to Venus. Although Venus is our closest member, it has remained a pretty fringe place to look for signs of life. Its surface is highly uninhabitable for life as we know it on Earth, as temperatures range up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit and bone-crushing atmospheric pressures of 90 times higher than that of Earth, which is kind of like having 1,000 pounds of pressure hitting every square inch of your body. Not fun. Despite all of that, scientists think that Venus may have once had oceans of liquid water that boiled off, but that would have been about 1 billion years ago. Today its surface is far drier than anywhere on Earth, and its atmosphere consists mostly of carbon dioxide with clouds of sulfuric acid, which you may have learned in pop culture, dissolves nearly any organic life it comes into contact with. Despite these hellish conditions and a handful of doubters, the scientists have been arguing since the 1960s that life could exist in a region 30 miles above the surface, where temperatures and pressures are similar to those on Earth's surface, and where small airborne organisms could possibly survive. Quote, "It's a very fertile environment." According to an astrobiologist and senior scientist with the Planetary Science Institute in Tucson, who himself is not involved with the most recent study, but he goes on to say, quote, "The cloud droplets provide an aqueous environment," which basically means it could contain water. And he goes on to say, quote, "There are many nutrients and other elements you need for life, and plenty of energy sources as well. One potential scenario is that life evolved on the surface when Venus still had oceans and was still inhabitable as Earth is today, and then when the conditions became more rough, they migrated to the clouds as the planet grew warmer over time. This life would have to be likely microscopic and perhaps similar to some forms of bacteria that spend part of their lives in the ephemeral clouds on Earth." Now, I think it would be incredibly funny if it turned out that it was bacteria that was living on Venus. Because after humanity's long search for life, the only one they could find would make an uninhabitable planet even more uninhabitable. According to an astronomer at Cardiff University in Wales, he knew that the clouds of Venus had been suggested as a potential habitat for life, and that phosphine could signal the presence of life on rocky planets. So they put 2 and 2 together and set out to search for phosphine in a small band of Venus's atmosphere that just might be inhabitable. Quote, I was specifically looking for signs of life. They started this research back in 2017, and it wasn't until 2018 that they finally were able to take a close look at what the telescope they had access to pointed at Venus was able to see. It took several months to tease out a detection of phosphine from the noisy data, but eventually they found it. One team member remembers the day she received an email from the leader with the detection spectra. Quote, I just sat there blinking at the screen. When I regained the power of speech, I gave her a call and said, you just blew my mind. Am I really seeing what I think I'm seeing here? And the answer was yes. They went and found phosphine experts who could help determine whether the gas really did represent a potential sign of life on Venus. And they conducted many experiments, some of which took place at MIT. The MIT team explored every chemical process they could think of that had the potential to generate phosphine from Venus without the aid of life. When they incorporated lightning into meteor strikes into their models, they determined that phosphine could be produced on Venus, but only in amounts that were a tiny fraction of what the scientists have found. Moreover, phosphine should degrade in the atmosphere over time, but the study amount suggests that it's being constantly replenished. They then considered whether tectonic activity might have driven the production of the gas. Quote, we didn't even think that there were tectonics on Venus, but it still seems less crazy than aliens. That's why I really like this study, is because all of the best scientists are their own biggest critic. And that's clearly demonstrated here, as ultimately they could not find a plausible explanation for the presence of phosphine, so long as it did not involve any kind of life form. But of course, that doesn't mean that there isn't one. One astrobiologist at the University of South Florida went on to say, quote, it definitely bears further inquiry. My guess would be that there is some non-biological process that is making it, but they certainly found something weird. And the study's authors actually agree with him. They believe that there is much more work to be done in the future, but they also hope that their findings will inspire more scientists to study phosphine. I was hoping they were going with extraterrestrial life, but phosphine's cool too. They also hope to spend more time characterizing the phosphine on Venus to find clues about how it got there. Since their discovery, there have been many upcries for them to send a spacecraft to Venus, but of course, a simple university cannot do that alone. However, they imply that NASA has 2 Venus missions currently under review, and that they would be part of those missions if they ever get off the ground. But, of course, and unfortunately, the biggest factor in this is time. It would take years and possibly decades to prove conclusively whether there was life in the Venus clouds. And to wrap up, I will read the final words in the report by the team leader. Quote, we have a long road ahead of us. Now, ideally, where they are going, they won't need roads, but where we are now, that is all I have for you. Please stay tuned to the next segment. We will talk about the top 10 Kim Jung Un crazy rumors and conspiracies. Kind of a change of pace, but we will get to it, and it'll be a heck of a fun time, so stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, my friends, to the GSMC Weird News Podcast with our top 10 Kim Jung Un crazy rumors and conspiracy theories. Enough of that science junk. Let's talk about North Korea. Alright, number 10. Kim Jung Un has a mandatory haircut. Aren't these beautiful? In 2014, it was reported by Radio Free Asia that male North Korean university students were required to get Kim's unique haircut. It is said, of course, that Kim's trim is a military style that involves shaved sides, a long top, and a center part. And above all, it is hardly cutting-edge fashion. I am looking at it as I speak, and I can say in whole honesty that the only thing more stupid than his haircut is his tiny eyebrows. But I wouldn't have my dictator any other way. According to reports, the mandate split opinions, with some people labeling the hairstyle as a, quote, Chinese smuggler haircut. Therefore, it is unclear if there ever actually was a mandate, as everything that comes out of North Korea is largely unclear. More so, visitors were not noticing any more move towards the style, although North Korean TV has previously launched a campaign against long hair. More recently, authorities have reportedly cracked down on, quote, non-socialistic behavior, such as unapproved hairstyles, reportedly limiting men to 10 styles and women to 18. Alright, if that wasn't weird for you enough, number 9, the Kipunjo or Pleasure Squad. It is alleged that there is a group of approximately 2,000 women whom are maintained for the purpose of providing entertainment and pleasure, often sexual, for high-ranking worker parties for the North Korean officials and distinguished guests. This group is called Kipumunju, which is my weekly mispronunciation of the week, and Kipumunju actually means Pleasure Squad, or Pleasure Brigade, or Joy Division. Sorry, just reading Joy Division makes me think that Kim Jung Un likes to listen to mopey rock music. Anyway, it is believed that this group was disbanded after Kim Jong-il's death, but in 2015, it was reported that Kim Jung Un was recruiting new members as young as 13 or 14. It's understood that Kim's train is staffed by Kipamunju, who are North Korean certified virgins. Jesus Christ, what a disgusting person. Many of these women are reported to be, quote, retired in their 20s and married off to military officers. It is also worth noting that Kim is married to former singer Ri Sol-ju, and they reportedly have 3 children, although even that is not verified. Alright, number 8. This is probably his most well-known controversial thing, his NBA obsession. It's just kind of weird. It's well known that he has a great friendship with the ex-NBA star Dennis Rodman, which comes from his deep love for basketball. During his high school days in Switzerland, he grew up living his life obsessed with hoops, becoming fascinated with Michael Jordan. A former friend of his Swiss school said Kim's room was covered in NBA paraphernalia. He showed off photographs with Kobe Bryant and other famous players after allegedly being driven to Paris for an exhibition game as a child. However, it's not clear whom Kim officially supports, but he has an affection for both Chicago Bulls and Los Angeles Lakers. Rodman traveled to North Korea in 2013, God knows why, along with 3 Harlem Globetrotters at Kim's invitation. There's been other visits with basketball players touring the country as well. In 2019, he reportedly requested the United States president to provide access to, quote, famous basketball players as part of a nuclear weapons talk. What a joke. It runs in the family after Kim's father, Kim Jong-il, previously requested to meet Jordan during his reign, although the 6-time NBA champion declined the opportunity because he's a badass. Despite the refusal, Kim Jung Un is clearly fascinated by the sport. Whether he was any good at it as a child is another question altogether. Number 7, he blew up a South Korean warship. In 2010, before Kim took over his father's spot, he was reportedly involved in the sinking of a South Korean warship, on which 104 South Korean personnel were guarding their country along the maritime border. 46 of those South Korean soldiers were killed in the unprovoked and unintentional and yet international incident, which was allegedly designed to help aid Kim's military credentials ahead of his succession. As a result, international experts investigated the incident and found that the warship was sunk by a North Korean torpedo. North Korea, of course, denied responsibility and even offered to aid the investigation, but South Korea imposed sanctions preventing economic relations as a result of the sunken ship. Both China and Russia dismissed South Korea's claims. China and Russia, the arbiters of truth. A Russian investigation later suggested the sinking was more likely due to the corvette warship dredging up a mine. Which is actually a pretty good excuse, but I think the damage difference between a mine and a torpedo is quite significantly noticeable. Nevertheless, until this day, nobody agrees on why the ship was sunk. Number 6, Kim Jung Un has a compassionate side. For all the crazy dictator talk, there is reportedly a human side to Kim, who has improved North Korea's relations with internationality since coming into power. He has reportedly showed his compassionate streak in 2014 when a 23-story apartment building collapsed, killing more than 100 people. According to the KCNA, the construction of an apartment house was not done properly, and officials supervised and controlled it in an impersonable manner. In the aftermath of the disaster, Kim came out and issued a rare public apology for the, quote, unimaginable tragedy. According to the reports, Kim was also hurt. He, quote, sat up all night feeling painful after being told about the accident. Skeptics, of course, will point out that it took 5 days for the state media to report the story, and no figure was ever disclosed for the number of fatalities. And typically, a dictator's actions have more consequence than his words. Number 5, the secret hangover cure. Similar to his father, Kim allegedly likes to party. He's also known for his extravagant tastes. His drink of choice are Johnny Walker whiskey and Hennessy gin. Say what you will about the man, those are good-ass choices. He's been known to sip cognac on luxury yachts as well. In fact, since he took charge of North Korea, imports of wine and other spirits have increased. Which, for those who don't know, is a classic sign of economic prosperity. However, his all-night drinking sessions reportedly led him to organizing sauna equipment imported from Finland and Germany to help ease his hangovers as well as his fatigue. His idea is that sweating out the previous night's sins will prepare him for the next day's dictatorial duties. The jury is still out if saunas are actually useful in curing hangovers, but that's for the scientists to decide. Clearly, the morning after headache was an issue for Kim, as North Korean scientists claim in 2016 to have created a revolutionary hangover-free liquor. Apparently, Kuro liquor blends 6-year-old ginseng and scorched rice, cutting out the sugar. Now, I should note, as somebody who knows a bit about liquor, this is nothing revolutionary. Usually just the more alcohol is in a drink, and the less additives are in a drink, the less likely you are to get a hangover the next day. I own a rectified spirit that's 96% alcohol, and I've never gotten a headache from it when I can easily get a headache if I have more than 2 glasses of wine. Probably shouldn't be talking about this, but oh well. Number 4, he's executed members of his own family. Nobody is safe in North Korea. Kim's uncle Jang Song-taek was arrested for theocracy and treachery in December of 2013 and labeled as a traitor at a military tribunal. He was then executed by firing squad. It is believed that Kim tried to ease Jang from history by then deleting thousands of news articles about him, but also executing members of his family, including children and grandchildren of close relatives. Despite the propagandist efforts to whitewash Jang from history, a few years later, Jang's image appeared on state-run media in a photograph during a 1-hour documentary, which was about 11 historical North Korean figures. The editor of the documentary may have been imprisoned for this error. This is how seriously Kim takes his lies. Kim's estranged half-brother, Kim Jung Un was also killed in 2017. Malaysia authorities claim he was assassinated at a busy terminal in Kuala Lumpur International Airport in 2017 when two women approached him and smeared his face with a chemical agent. Kim told an airport receptionist, quote, "Someone had grabbed him from behind and splashed a liquid on his face. He was transferred to a hospital and died there." So, if you ask me, Kim Jung Un's a real jerk. Number 3, a luxury private island. The aforementioned NBA star Dennis Rodman formed a weird relationship with the great successor and visited North Korea in 2013. Afterwards, Rodman spoke about Kim's private island like Hawaii or Ibiza, but he's the only one that lives there, according to Rodman. We've all been intrigued ever since. The location of the mysterious island, which has its own marina and bays with 24-hour armed troops surrounding it, has never been verified, but it's believed to be close to the port of Wonsan. Rodman added that the island was, quote, like a 7-star party. And you know Rodman means it when he says it, with endless cocktail and jet skis. He also revealed to get to the island, he boarded Kim's 95-foot yacht, which was a, quote, cross between a ferry and a Disney boat. To be fair, I don't think there's a difference between ferries and Disney boats, but what do I know? Number 2, the Flamethrower Execution. This one's a bit brutal, by the way. It's kind of like that movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Because it's alleged that Kim ordered the execution of one of his deputy security ministers by a flamethrower as part of a political purge in 2014. The minister was a key figure in North Korean government's Ministry of People's Security, but was seen to be supporting Kim's uncle Jang Song-thaek, who was earlier executed for treachery as previously mentioned. It is therefore believed that the minister had turned large parts of the government into Jang's personal protection squad. As a result, North Korean defector Kang Chao-han said Kim Jung Un, quote, personally hated him, so he personally ordered him to be executed by a flamethrower. To exemplify Hollywood stereotypes, it's believed the man's lifeless body was also crushed under a tank, too. Good gravy, that is not Christian. Number 1, the CIA hired a North Korean lumberjack to kill Kim. So, the North Korean government claimed in 2014 that the United States Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and the South Korean National Intelligence Services, NIS, collaborated to hire a Russian-based North Korean lumberjack in a biochemical plot to assassinate him. It's reported that the method was a biochemical substance or weapon that was radioactive and nanopoisonous. Apparently, it may have taken some months to kill Kim. In response, North Korean State News Agency, Korean Central News Agency, KCNA, goodness gracious, too many acronyms, cited no evidence, but wrote a 1,800-word report which alleged a, quote, hideous terrorist group which had conspired to target the supreme leadership during a military parade. International outlets were never able to verify this report, but it's worth noting it came at a time of high tension between all of these countries. Furious North Korean authorities said that they'd seek the extradition of anybody involved in the foiled plot. A person identified only as Kim, who worked in the timber industry in Khabarovsk in Far East Russia, was the only suspect named publicly, albeit vaguely. And that is all I have for the greatest clown in the modern times. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I will also ask that you please subscribe and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Leave a comment or a review. We really, really appreciate it when you do. Thank you, and have a goddamn good night.